We are on page 17 of our Machzor, and Ross is going to lead us in a Shekiah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'ehyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
We now continue on page 20 of our Machzor, which we'll read it to you in English. Hear me, Jacob, Israel, whom I have called. I am the one, the beginning and the end. My own hand founded the earth and spread out the skies. Thus says the Eternal One, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who made the earth and all that grows in it, who gives breath to its people and the spirit to those who walk on it. I, the Eternal, have called you to righteousness and taken you by the hand and kept you. I've made you a covenant people, a light to the nations, and opened blind eyes, to bring the captives out of prison and those who sit in darkness from their dungeons. Thus says the Eternal One, creator of heavens, the one who is, I am, I will be, there is none else. Justice is my speech, right my declaration. The troubled past is forgotten, hidden from my sight. For behold, I create a new heaven and a new earth, the past forgotten, never called to mind. Be glad then and rejoice forever in my creation. Before us lies a new day, and in the distance a new world, ours to create, but the strength of our faith. We now continue on page 21, in the middle of that page with Asa Einai, which Ross is going to sing for us.
Asa Einai el harim, ma'in yavo ezri. Asa Einai el harim, ma'in yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz. Asa Einai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Asa Einai el harim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, oseh shamayim va'aretz.
And we now continue on the top of page 23. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, there shall be a sacred assembly, a cessation from work, a day of commemoration, proclaimed by the sound of the shofar.
Tigu b'choresh shofar, kechesed yom chageinu, ki chok leYisrael hu, mishpat leElohei Yaakov.
In a moment, we're going to open the ark, and so if you would like to rise at home, I encourage you to do so. We now continue on the top of page 24, and Ross and I are going to open the ark. May it be your will, eternal our God, God of all generations, that the year 5781 bring to us in the whole house of Israel life and peace, joy and exaltation, redemption, comfort, and let us say, Amen. I'm very excited to invite the Mitra brothers up here on the bima to join Ross in singing Ma'ariv Arabim and Ahavat Olam. We now continue on the top of page 25. There was silence, and there was chaos, and there was a voice. A mind went forth to form worlds. Now order reigns where chaos once held sway. The law makes evening fall, and the law brings on the dawn. The moon follows accustomed paths, constellations their patterned ways. Sovereign is the will that orders the stars in their courses in the endless skies. Sovereign is that will. And how unyielding is the will of our people, Israel. After the long nights, after the days and years when our ashes blacken the sky, Israel endures, heart still turned to love, soul turning still to life. So day and night, early and late, we will rejoice in the study of Torah. We will walk in the light of mitzvot. They are our life in the length of our days. Praise be the source of life and love in the Israel, our people. And we now continue with the Shema on top of page 26.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
And we continue on page 27. What does it mean to be a Jew? You shall be holy. In the face of the many, to stand for the one, in the presence of fragments, to make them whole. What does it mean to be a Jew? You shall be a holy people. To hold fast to our vision of truth, to retain our faith in tomorrow. Holy in our past is the memory of redemption from Egyptian bondage. Holy in our day is the hope of a redemption we still await. Twice holy in our past were those who gave their lives to hollow this world. Holy is the Jew today and tomorrow who bears witness to the goodness of lives. And holy are those whose lives are songs and freedom's cause. And we now continue on the top of page 28 with the Michamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות וספר, מלכותך ראו עיניך, חוקי הים לפני משה, זה אלי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Now let all come to say, the Eternal has redeemed Israel and all the oppressed. Blessed is the eternal God.
ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני God Israel.
We continue on top of page 29. May we lie down this night in peace and rise up to life renewed. May night spread over us a shelter of peace, of quiet and calm, the blessing of rest. There will come a time when morning will bring no word of war or famine or anguish. There will come a day of happiness, of contentment and peace. Praise be the source of joy within us, for the night and its rest, for the promise of peace. It gives me great joy to invite the Nietzsche brothers back on the bima to join Ross in singing the Shamru on page 29.
Lasso השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש.
Thank you, Nietzsche Brothers, and thank you, Ross. That was so beautiful. And we now continue on the bottom of page 29 with the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitgadol, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, B'alma divrei chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chai echon u'yom echon, u'v'chai lechol Beit Yisrael, barav izman kariv, v'himru amen. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitbar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh, v'yithalal, Shemei Kedusha berichu, le'ela u'le'ela, mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram b'yama, v'himru amen.
And we now continue with the Amidah, which you can find on top of page 30.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agit hilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agit hilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Goel Livnei B'neihem, L'man Shemo Be'ahava. Zachrenu l'chaim, Melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chatmenu b'sefer ha'chaim, L'mancha Elohim chaim, Melech ozer, u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, v'chaim itim hakol rav le'hoshia, mechalkel chaim v'chesed, mechayei hakol v'rachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofei cholim, u'matir asurim, u'mekayem emunato, l'shenei afar, michamocha ba'al gevurot, u'midom melach, melech nimid, u'mechayeh, u'matzmiach Yeshua. Michamocha, avarachami,
take the next few moments to continue praying silently. Uvechein tein parecha. Eternal God, cause all your works to stand in awe before you, and all that you have made to tremble at your presence. Let all that lives revere you, and all creation turn to you in worship. Let them all become a single family, doing your will with a perfect heart. For well we know, eternal God, that yours is the majesty, yours the might, and awesome is your name in all creation. Grant honor to your people, glory to those who revere you, hope to those who seek you, and courage to those who trust you. Bless your land with gladness and your city with joy, and cause the light of redemption to dawn for all who dwell on earth. Then the just shall see and exult, the upright be glad, and the faithful sing for joy. Violence shall rage no more, and evil shall vanish like smoke. The rule of tyranny shall pass away from the earth, and you alone shall reign over all your works. As it is written, the Eternal One shall reign forever, your God, O Zion, from generation to generation. Hallelujah. We now continue in the middle of page 33.
Kadosh ata v'norosh mecha v'ein Elohim mibadecha kakatuv v'yigbaron noitzvachot hamishpat v'el hakadosh nitztak nitztaka Baruch atah Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh.
And we now continue on page 34. In love and favor, O God, you have chosen us from all the peoples, hallowing us with your mitzvot. Our sovereign, you have summoned us to your service, and that through us your great and holy name may become known in all the earth. In your love, O God, you've given us this Shabbat and this day of remembrance to hear the sound of the shofar, to unite in worship, and to recall the exodus from Egypt.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Ya'alev Yavov v'Yizaker, Zichronenu v'Zichron kol Amcha Beit Yisrael lefanecha, L'tova l'cheinu l'chesed l'rachamim, l'chaim u'l'shalom, b'yom hazikaron hazeh. Zacharenu Adonai Eloheinu bo l'tova,
Amen.
ufatenu vo livracha,
Amen.
Hoshienu vo l'chayim.
Amen. We now continue in the middle of page 35.
Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu, ritzei b'mnuchatenu, ka'adshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkenu b'toratecha, tzabenu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'yeshuatecha, v'anchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ahava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael, v'kadeshei shemecha, v'taher libeinu l'avdecha be'emet, ki ata Elohim emet, u'dvarcha emet v'kayam lad, Baruch atah Adonai, melech hakol haaretz. Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael, Melech HaKol Haaretz, Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael, V'yom HaZikaron.
We continue on page 36. Be gracious, eternal God, to your people Israel, and receive our prayers with love. Oh, may our worship always be acceptable to you. Fill us with the knowledge that you are near to all who seek you in truth, and pour out your Spirit upon us. Let our eyes behold your presence in our midst, and in the midst of our people in Zion. Blessed is the Eternal, whose presence gives life to Zion and all Israel.
Modim anachnu lach, she'atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avoteinu le'olam va'ed. Tzur chageinu magen yishenu atahu l'dor v'dor. Nodeh lecha nesaper tehilotecha, al chayinu hamasrim biyadecha, v'al nishmotenu hapkudot lach. Ve'al nisecha sheb'chol yom imanu, ve'al niflotecha v'tovatecha, sheb'chol erev avoker v'tzaharayim. Tov ki lo charu lachramecha, v'ham rachem ki lo tamu chasedecha, ve'olam kivinu lach.
We gratefully acknowledge that you are our eternal God and God of our people, the God of all generations. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank you and sing your praises for our lives which are in your hands, for our souls which are in your keeping, for the miracles which are daily with us, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. You are goodness. Your mercies never end. You are compassion. Your love never fails. You've always been our hope.
V'al kulam yitbarach v'yirmam shim kamalkeinu tamid le'olam va'ed, v'chatu l'chaim tovim kol b'nei v'ritecha, v'chol ha'chaim yidoch ha'sela v'yalu et shimcha be'emet, ha'el yeshuateinu v'ezratenu sela, baruch atah Adonai, atov shimcha l'chana'el lehodot.
For all these things, O sovereign God, let your name be forever exalted and blessed, and let life abundance be an heritage of all the children of your covenant. O God, our Redeemer and Helper, let all who live affirm you and praise your name in truth. Eternal God, whose nature is goodness, we give you thanks and praise. It gives me great pleasure to invite the Mitra brothers back on the bima to join Ross and Shalom Rav and with Oseh Shalom.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, tasim leolam. V'tov b'neka levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol et u'b'chol shah b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha, tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha, tasim leolam.
Sefer Chaim Beracha V'Shalom U'Farnasa Tova Nizacher V'Nikatev B'Fanecha Anachnu V'Chol Amcha Beit Yisrael L'chaim Tovim U'L'Shalom Baruch Atah Adonai Oseh HaShalom.
Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Vimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Vimru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
We're now going to turn to page 40 for Avini Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu Shema Koleinu.
Avini Malkeinu, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Fanecha.
Avini Malkeinu, we have sinned against you.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamo Aleinu V'Ya'ol Aleinu V'Tapeinu.
Avini Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our children.
Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Dever V'Cherev Rav Ne'aleinu.
Avini Malkeinu, make an end to sickness, war, and famine.
Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Kol Tsar Umastin Me'aleinu.
Avini Malkeinu, make an end to all oppression.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatleinu V'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avini Malkeinu, inscribe us for a blessing in the book of life.
Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova.
Avini Malkeinu, let the new year be a good year for us.
Avinu Malkeinu Harim Keren Yisrael Amecha.
Avini Malkeinu, give strength to your people Israel.
Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu Aleinu. Ki hein banu ma'asim aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed aseh imanu
For we have little merit. Treat us generously and with kindness. Be our help. Please join us as we make Kiddush on page 42.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei v'hi agafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher bachar banu mikol am, v'romamanu mikol hashon, v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu v'yahava et yom hazikaron hazeh yom teruah mikra kodesh zecher zecher litziat mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim udvarcha emet v'kayam lad Baruch atah Adonai melech hakol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael melech hakol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
And we will now continue with my sermon. One of my favorite parts of Judaism is studying the Torah portion of the week. And each week, the entire Jewish world studies the same portion of the Torah. And I really enjoy this process. All of us Jews, no matter our age or even sect, come together to study and struggle with the exact same portion. And each week, I look at the portion and I develop a sermon and a text study based on the narrative and values of that particular portion. And throughout the year, I get into the flow of it. But some Jewish holidays, like the high holidays or Sukkot, disrupt the flow of the portions of the week. And I always find this interruption abrasive. Throughout the year, I grow comfortable with the predictability of a new portion coming each week chronologically. Yet during the high holidays, the chronological order of the portions are suspended to make room for the thematic portions of the high holidays and Sukkot. And this makes me uncomfortable. My comfort zone, if you will, is going to the next chapter or verses of the Torah. But now I need to study the thematic portions of our holidays instead. And for a moment, it's a new normal. before we get past Simchat Torah and restart the Torah portion back to Breshit, the first chapter of Genesis. And even though this is difficult for me, struggling with change is one of the enduring themes of our Torah. Before COVID, I used to think that the singular enduring theme of the Torah was the relationship between Adonai and the Israelites. This was my universal understanding of this sacred text. However, thanks to my experiences, I've come to believe that the Torah is not just a book about the relationship between the Israelites and Adonai. It's also a narrative about the Israelites' relationship with change. And one of the most popular tropes in the Torah is the world changing around the characters and the people of it. For example, Noah is required to build an ark because his world is about to go from terrestrial to aquatic. Abraham is required to travel to the land of Canaan from his hometown of Ur. Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah all also have to leave their hometowns to live in the land of Canaan. Jacob and his family moved from Israel to Egypt due to a famine, and the Israelites, with Moses, escape Egypt and spend time in the Sinai. So much of the story of our biblical heroes are people who face great change for themselves and with the Israelites. The Torah is a sacred text dedicated to documenting a people whose lives are continuously in a liminal state, a state of transition. We would think that the Israelites would be good at change, that they'd be used to it and flexible with it. But in fact, we actually have quite the opposite. The Israelites hate change. And I feel the Torah is preserving the fact that the Israelites are bad at it. For example, when the Israelites leave the land of Egypt, we often celebrate that fact, right? We celebrate the Israelites embracing freedom. They were slaves in Egypt, and now they are free. And they're off to go to the land of Israel through the Sinai. We celebrate this moment every year with Passover, and it's a beautiful moment for us. But we don't usually celebrate the difficult time the Israelites have getting used to their new normal. And while they were once slaves in Egypt, Egypt was also their home. They lived in a world they were born into, and for them, it was their normal, their baseline. While they are free, they also have to embrace a nomadic lifestyle, and the Israelites are not adapting well to their new environment. For example, in Numbers 11, which I have right here, it says, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our gullets are shriveled. There's nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to." The Israelites are doing so poorly at getting used to their new normal that they are literally wishing to be slaves again so they can enjoy cucumbers. This is to the extent to which the Israelites are fighting change. And it gets worse from there, because the Israelites essentially beeline it to the land of Israel. At first, there is no wandering, just a straight journey from Egypt to Israel. And however, when they learn that they will need to get used to a new normal to settle the land of Israel, right, from home dwellers to nomads to settlers, they freak out. And they dramatically say, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we might die in this wilderness. Why is Adonai taking us to that land to fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be carried off. It would be better for us to go back to Egypt. Let us go back to Egypt." Moses and Aaron realize they are asking too much of the Israelites to change so quickly, and so their solution is to wander the wilderness for 40 years to prepare the future generation to be settlers in the land of Israel. So whether it's by providence or coincidence, I believe that it's these passages in the Torah that's getting us ready for a time like now, a time when a pandemic changes our community, our society, our world into a new normal. A new normal like watching this pre-recorded sermon instead of seeing it live or in person. And while I believe the Israelites' reaction to change is unfortunate, I'm so thankful that the Torah preserves it, because I believe that the Israelites are not complaining so much as grieving. And I don't think we are hearing logical arguments concerning the benefits of being slaves in Egypt. I think we are hearing a people in deep grief, emotionally navigating all the changes in their lives and trying to understand what it means to be a free people. I also believe it's unfair to think that their reaction would be any different than any other person's grief over losing a home and having to endure a new lifestyle. Now, many people understand grieving to be a reaction to death, and I do too. And I happen to believe that grieving is also a reaction to change. If you think about it, when a loved one dies, those who they loved have to have their lives changed forever. Certainly they are grieving the loss of a loved one, but they're also grieving for the old normal that life used to contain. Accepting a new normal requires a period of grief. We mourn what we lose. So it's important to remember that because of COVID-19, everyone in our community is in a period of grief, or must endure the grief of COVID in addition to other ways that they are mourning. It's also important to remember that people understand grief in different ways. In fact, I venture to guess that many are not even aware they are in a period of grief, including the Israelites. And I believe it's important to understand how our own grief affects ourselves and others. And I want to spend the rest of my sermon talking about grief. Every lament the Israelites have to be back in Egypt is part of a mourning process. The fact that the Israelites themselves may not be cognizant of their own grief is a real problem. Because if they don't understand they're in a period of mourning, they may not understand the best ways to manage and accept what they are feeling. They may be confused for how their family and friends are acting due to this grief. And this gives rise to certain stigmas and cultural cues attached to grieving that I feel are inappropriate or unhelpful. For example, many people feel that grief should only last a specific amount of time for all grievers, when it is well documented that different people need different amounts of time to mourn, and sometimes it takes 40 years or more. For more help on the subject of grief, I'm going to bring in some texts that don't come from our Torah. And one of my favorite books on grief is called It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. In it, she writes, "Our culture sees grief as a kind of malady, a terrifying, messy emotion that needs to be cleaned up and put behind us as soon as possible. As a result, we have outdated beliefs around how long grief should last and what it should look like. We see it as something to overcome, something to fix, rather than something to tend or support." This means there are so many layers of complexity in a world that the pandemic has delivered to us. A person may not realize they are grieving. That person may live in a society that treats grief as a malady and a mess that needs to be cleaned. That person may see others grieving and are not sure how to support them due to the societal message. Furthermore, that person may not know how to support themselves. How is anyone expected to navigate this pandemic when our whole society is in a process of grief and, like the Israelites, may not know what to do with it? How can we make choices that are healthy for our emotional and mental state when our support system is also grieving? Megan Devine writes, "There's a catch-22 in grief support. Because we don't talk about the realities of grief in our culture, no one really knows how to help." And this, I believe, is what's going on with the Israelites as well. They don't know how to talk about the reality of grief, and they don't know how to support each other. As a result, what we see looks like a people who like to complain a lot, instead of seeing a people who need compassion and support for bearing a huge loss. And I believe that the Torah is teaching us that we all carry pain and hardship because of COVID, and that just waiting for COVID to go away is not enough. It won't actually take our pain away with it. The pain we are feeling, it may be permanent. It may be a new normal. And it's up to us to support and help each other to bear it. Even as our own society struggles to understand how to comfort those who have lost, there is much we can accomplish in understanding our grief. In her book, Megan Devine talks about the unfortunate belief that our society thinks of grief in two extremes. One is being a grieving wreck forever, unable to cope or handle the world. The other extreme is being transformed into a new and better person with a better life thanks to grief. She suggests the middle way. She says in her book, finding the middle ground is the real work of grief, my work and yours. Each of us, each one of us, has to find our way into that middle ground, a place that doesn't ask us to deny our grief and doesn't doom us forever, a place that honors the full breath of grief, which is really the full breath of love. It took the Israelites 40 years to find this middle ground. And in my mind, that's exactly the amount of time they needed. The only measurement we can make about the length of a period of grief is when we each decide we have personally reached this middle ground. And during the high holiday season, I encourage you to search yourself and discern the ways you are grieving because of COVID-19, or how COVID-19 has added to your grief. And as Megan Devine points out, the other side of grief is love. We feel great grief because we feel great love. The love that we have, even in loss, should be something to celebrate. Feeling grief isn't a bad thing. Feeling grief is understanding that we loved. Loving something should never be bad. We should not fear love due to loss. In fact, loss helps us understand why we love so much. And Jews have a lot to say about this. For example, Rabbi Shira Stern writes in a poem called Moving On or Moving Forward. Moving on means starting afresh, which is a nearly impossible task. Moving forward, however, means venturing forth on uncharted territory. And that's hard, almost excruciatingly so. From whom will we seek wisdom or guidance or comfort or nourishment for body and soul as we move forward? Moving on asks us to shed our past, but moving forward allows the possibility of bringing some of what we loved along with us into the future. Rabbi Harold Schulreich writes a poem called Kriya, Tearing the Cloth. Each of us a letter in the Torah scroll, he writes. Together our lives are intertwined. Our common fate and faith, our common destiny find us like the stitches of the parchment. When any of us is lost, the holy text is torn. In memory, we are mended. Between now and Yom Kippur, we have so much work to do. This high holiday season is doubly hard. We need to seek teshuvah and improve ourselves from our mistakes as we do every year. And we also need to work to understand how this new normal of a world with COVID is affecting us. And this work is more than just discovering our own grief and the grief in others. This work is learning how to bear its load. And that may be a different process for different people. It may be recognizing that this grief caused by the changes of COVID-19 may not go away. It may be recognizing the love in our loss and learning how to bring that love with us in a COVID world. Or it may be reaching out and supporting others, and in that support, learning how we support ourselves. During these days of awe, I encourage you to explore your feelings and learn how to move forward into this middle ground and in your own time, mend the holy text that this pandemic has torn. Thank you. I would like to welcome the Misha brothers back on the bima for the Misha Berach.
Name
now continue with the Elenu, which starts on page 43. And we now continue on page 45 with the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadol Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, B'Alma Divrach Yotev Yamlik Malchute, V'chayechon U'yamechon U'chayed L'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalah U'zman Kari V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mebarak Le'olam U'lamei Almaya, Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'yitpa'ar V'yidromam V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Kudashah V'richu, Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechamata, Da'amiran V'alma V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya, V'chayim Alini V'kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Alini V'kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. And we're now going to conclude our Erev Rosh Hashanah service with the brothers and Ra singing Adon Olam on page 47.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Lehet Nasa V'Etzol Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nira Ve'acharei Kiflot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora Lehu Haya Vehu ve'ayira ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai ve'lo yira.
All right, well, thank you so much, Nutra Brothers and Ross. What a wonderful job this evening. And I want to wish everyone a Shana Tova and a sweet new year as we conclude our Erev Rosh Hashanah service. And we'll see you all again tomorrow morning at 10:30 for our first day Rosh Hashanah service. So I want to say Shabbat Shalom and Yom Tov.
Shana Tova Tikutevu Umateku.